Chapter 2. Where does your food come from? We don't inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. David Brower. For the majority of people in the Western world, their food comes from a supermarket. Our supermarkets are groaning with inexpensive food, giving us a feeling of abundance. Where does all this food come from? How is it produced? At whose expense is it produced? How can they afford to sell it so cheaply? Is it good quality? Many people are starting to ask these questions. They also wonder why, with such an abundance of food, we have growing statistics of degenerative diseases in the population. Food is big business. A myriad of commercial and political interests are involved at every step of food production and distribution. As a result, our world is full of commercial misinformation about food. On top of that, we have food science, largely funded by commercial companies, which is producing an endless stream of nutritional misinformation for the population. Because it is science, people believe it. To find true information about food takes a special effort. There is a myth perpetuated in the media that we cannot produce enough meat, milk, and eggs to feed the population. This idea comes from industrial farming, where animals and birds are raised in factories, confined animal factory operations, in terrible conditions. They are crowded to the point that the animals cannot turn around. They stand and sleep in their own waste and are fed commercial feed inappropriate for their physiology. The waste from these confinement operations is a toxic pollution poisoning our waterways, and the meat, eggs, and milk produced are of poor quality. Animals and birds kept in confinement are prone to diseases and require constant input of expensive antibiotics and other drugs. On top of that, government regulations are difficult to comply with. So animal husbandry is not popular amongst industrial farmers. Growing plants, however, is much easier for a conventional farmer because of modern machinery and chemicals, and Western governments subsidize growing of crops. So indeed, from the point of view of industrial agriculture, growing crops is much easier than producing meat, milk, and eggs. However, when it comes to truly organic, natural food production, the truth is just the opposite. Producing meat, milk, and eggs is easy compared to producing plant foods. All you have to do is provide natural, ecologically clean habitat for the animals and birds to live in. As a result, they are healthy and do not need much extra feeding or care. All cows, sheep, goats, and other herbivorous animals need is natural, chemical-free pasture with plenty of growing grasses and herbs. They will convert this plant matter into meat and milk for us. And the grass grows for free. All you have to do is keep moving the animals to new pastures to allow grasses to recover after grazing. The same goes for birds. They need organic pasture to roam on, and they will find a lot of their own foods: worms, grubs, grasses, and herbs. As they roam, the animals and birds fertilize the land, helping it to build new layers of humus-rich topsoil and increasing diversity of grasses and herbs in the pasture, improving its quality year after year. What is difficult to produce naturally is plant matter, vegetables, grains, and other edible plants. The reason for this is that growing plants naturally involves a lot of hard work, and the yield is unpredictable, because the produce is prone to damage by weather, birds, disease, animals, and insects. Nature does not grow monocultures, fields of one plant species. In any natural meadow, there are dozens of species of grasses and herbs growing in a mixture, supporting each other and protecting each other from diseases and pests. We humans want to grow wheat on one field, lettuce on another, and so on. As this idea goes against nature, these monocultures are prone to diseases and pests. So chemicals are heavily applied to get these monocultures to survive. Ask any organic or biodynamic farmer, or even a person who grows their own organic vegetables in a garden, and they will tell you that growing plants naturally is difficult and very labor intensive. Organic plants do not keep well. That is why organic produce has to be local and seasonal. With a few exceptions, truly organic vegetables and fruit will not travel around the globe well and then look fresh on a supermarket shelf. Organic produce also doesn't look good to an average consumer. The fruit and vegetables are all different sizes and can have blemishes and spots on them. Supermarkets do not accept this kind of produce because their customers want their vegetables and fruit to look perfect. As the demand for organic produce increased, industrial agriculture wanted a piece of the pie. As a result, they have watered down organic standards. A lot of produce labeled organic in supermarkets today is likely to come from these companies. On top of that, unfortunately, there is also a lot of cheating in the organic sector. When non-organic produce is sold as organic. To eat truly organic fruits and vegetables, we have to grow them ourselves or get them from local organic producers who usually sell their produce themselves or through small distributors. In the last couple of decades, vegetarianism has been vigorously promoted in the mainstream media, with claims that it will feed the growing population, that it is kind to the animals, will save the planet, and that it is a healthy lifestyle. The fact is, the only way to support populations of vegetarians is through chemical industrial agriculture. Only by using machines and toxic chemicals we can produce the yield of plant matter necessary. This propaganda for vegetarianism has likely been launched by the agrochemical industry, which can increase their profits dramatically if large populations of people turn vegetarian. Plant matter produced by industrial agriculture is full of pesticides, herbicides, and other highly toxic chemicals. There is no health to be gained by eating large amounts of these plants. Arable industrial agriculture uses cultivation methods and chemicals that destroy the soil. The soils of arable fields in the Western world are so damaged today that most of them are unable to support any plant life at all without the application of chemicals. Many old farmers will tell you that in their childhood and youth, there were worms in the soil on their fields and crops grew without any chemicals. Now there are no worms or any other signs of life in the soil, and nothing could grow on it without chemicals. The topsoil on our planet is a source of all life. It is the most precious part of nature, and it is being lost in staggering amounts every year due to the activity of our arable industrial agriculture, busy growing plants for us to eat. There is nothing saving the planet in choosing a vegetarian lifestyle, just the opposite. You become an activist for the destruction of the planet. Many people don't know that healthy topsoil is one of the most concentrated sources of carbon on Earth. As the soil gets destroyed, the carbon is released into the atmosphere. Industrial arable agriculture is a major contributor to global warming on our planet, probably the biggest contributor. Environmental scientists have already calculated that if we converted even a fraction of arable fields in the West into organic pasture, we would remove the large amounts of carbon from the atmosphere by locking it in the soil and reducing or even eliminating the threat of global warming as a result. Animals are essential in maintaining the health of topsoil on our planet. As they graze on pasture, they build layers of carbon-rich topsoil. By increasing the numbers of pastured animals on the planet, we can remove excessive carbon from the atmosphere. But of course, the companies which profit from industrial arable agriculture work very hard to suppress this information and prevent this from happening. Instead, they have put out false propaganda that animals belch out methane and increase global warming. This nonsense doesn't withstand common sense, let alone any scientific assessment. Amongst all human activity on planet Earth, industrial agriculture causes the biggest damage to our environment. It is an established fact that all deserts on the planet have been created by human activity, including the Sahara, Gobi, Nevada, and Australian deserts. Arable agriculture destroys the soil, turning it into dust. The Great Plains of America are a good example of that. When Europeans first reached that vast area of the American continent, they saw herds of buffalo so large that they stretched to the horizon. In the following decades, people killed the buffalo and turned the Great Plains into arable fields. The buffalo, over centuries, had built thick layers of topsoil, so the yields of crops were high for some years. But if the soil was destroyed, the yields reduced to nothing. The dead soil turned to dust and was blown away towards the Pacific Ocean. Once fertile, the Great Plains of America were turned into a dust bowl, a semi-desert. Healthy soil holds large amounts of water. Destroyed or damaged soil has no ability to hold water. The rains run off these fields and cause flooding in nearby villages and towns. In Europe and other industrialized countries, every winter thousands of people suffer from flooding, which is becoming more intense every year. We have to thank arable industrial agriculture for that. Having destroyed the soil, agricultural chemicals leach into groundwaters and poison our water supply. Chemical analysis of standard water supplies in Western countries shows the constant presence of these chemicals. Our water companies know that these chemicals are unavoidable and have developed acceptable levels of these poisons in our drinking water. Numbers of research studies have found that animals, insects, and other life forms which live in rivers and streams around arable fields are becoming extinct or damaged by agricultural chemicals. In addition, numerous small animals are killed by agricultural machines every year, while others disappear because their habitat has been destroyed. So there is nothing kind to animals or kind to the planet in a vegetarian lifestyle because it has to rely on arable industrial agriculture. Our planet is paying a very heavy price for all the plants we are growing on an industrial scale. Who benefits from that? Somebody very powerful. Commercial companies which produce agricultural chemicals and machinery. At one of my presentations to an American organization of organic farmers, I mentioned that one of the biggest agrochemical companies in their country influences their government. As soon as I said that, several people from the audience shouted, "They are our government!" Indeed, these very wealthy companies infiltrate governments of Western countries and guide their policies on food and agriculture. The greed of these companies is never ending. No matter how much profit they produce this year, they must produce more the next year. How can they do that? By selling more chemicals and machinery to farmers. How can they do that? By creating more arable lands and more demand for plant matter. In order to do that, they have created propaganda for vegetarianism and a slogan, We must feed the planet, which our government officials are parroting to the population. Yet every year our industrial agriculture overproduces grain. This fact is carefully hidden while the media gives people the idea that we are not producing enough. So governments dictate that more land should be plowed, more pasture and forests should be converted to arable fields, and more grain should be grown. All this is done in order to increase the profits of the agrochemical commercial complex. What about the animals and birds? As their pasture is converted into arable fields to grow more grain, they are confined to prisons, factories, where they are fed the overproduced grain. Grain is not an appropriate food for cows and other herbivorous animals. It makes them ill. Mother Nature has designed them to eat grass on pasture. Industrial agriculture is focused on profit, not on the health and well-being of animals and birds. So the animals and birds spend a short, miserable life in confinement, eating inappropriate food for their physiology. Then they are slaughtered and sold as meat in supermarkets. As the demand for grass-fed meat has grown, our industrial agriculture has found a way to deceive the consumer, and Western governments happily approved it. Animals are locked up in confinement and fed grass, which is harvested from fields sprayed with chemicals. The grass is usually one or two species of hybrid grasses, which do not grow on natural pasture because they cannot survive without chemical fertilizers. They call these animals grass-fed and sell their meat at a premium in supermarkets as grass-fed meat. This kind of meat cannot be compared to meat from animals and birds that spend a happy, healthy life on real, natural pasture, eating foods that Mother Nature has designed them to eat. People who have started raising their own animals and birds naturally will tell you that never again will they want to eat meat, milk, or eggs from a supermarket. Having tasted meat, eggs, and milk of proper quality, the quality Mother Nature has intended for us, they do not want to tolerate the poor quality of industrially produced food again. Eggs are a good example. Commercial egg producers use feed for their chickens that contain synthetic dye to make the egg yolks yellow. Without this synthetic dye, the yolks will be too pale to be acceptable. Eggs from chickens that range free on organic pastures obtain their color from carotenoids and other natural substances in the grasses and herbs that chickens eat in abundance. Apart from grass, free-range chickens eat lots of meat in the form of worms, grubs, and insects. Very good sources of protein and natural fats for the chicken. An egg is almost pure protein and fat, so chickens need a good amount of these nutrients in their diet. Commercial feed for chickens and other animals claims to provide protein in the form of soy. But soy is indigestible for most animals, including humans. Only microbes can digest it, a fact well known in traditional Japanese and Chinese culture, where soy has always been fermented to make food from it. Fermentation is applying microbes to break down food to pre-digest it for us. Chickens fed exclusively on commercial feed produce inferior quality eggs compared to chickens on pasture. Many people who choose to become vegetarians make this choice after discovering how industrial farming treats animals and birds. The cruelty of the system puts them off eating animal foods. But is becoming a vegan the right way to fight that system? What you do is exactly what industrial agriculture wants you to do. Eat more plants. By no longer eating animal foods, you play directly into their hands while damaging your own health. The right thing to do is to not stop eating meat, eggs, and dairy, but to start buying them from organic, natural farmers. These farmers treat their animals with love and care. They provide them with natural habitat to feed, to live in and feed them food natural to their physiology. These are happy and healthy animals and birds. The food we get from them is healthy and nourishing. These are the farmers and the animal welfare system that we must support. Unfortunately, governments in the Western world do not support natural organic farmers. Instead, they support industrial agriculture. It is very difficult to survive running a natural farm nowadays. Those farms that do well do so thanks to consumers who support them. What about milk? Milk used to be considered nature's perfect food. For millennia, to have a cow in the family was a blessing and a basis for the good health of the whole family. Unfortunately, our industrial agriculture was not happy with the amounts of milk a normal cow can produce. They wanted more milk to increase their profit. So Western scientists have come up with a solution. They created a new breed of cow in a laboratory. Today, we have a large black and white cow, which can produce 3 times more milk per day than a normal cow is able to produce. These animals are not natural. They cannot survive on grass only and have to be fed grain, soya, and many other additives. These cows are unhealthy. About 75% of them have mastitis at any time, so antibiotics are routinely given to them in food. These antibiotics finish up in milk. They suffer from arthritis, infertility, and cancer, and the majority of them die at an early age. An unhealthy animal produces unhealthy milk. Almost all milk and dairy products in Western supermarkets today come from these cows. No wonder medical science has accumulated a large amount of data to show that this milk is a causative factor in every degenerative disease on the planet, from heart disease, mental illness, and autoimmune problems to cancer. Fortunately, there is a consumer movement in the Western world for real milk from natural breeds of cow fed on organic pasture. Many farmers are producing this excellent quality milk today, and it is sold raw and unpasteurized. Western governments ruled by the commercial world have created different laws and regulations for the sale of this kind of milk. In some places it is banned, and other places can be sold at farmers markets only or at the farm gates. But the good news is, if consumers want to have real natural milk, they can get it most places in the Western world today. The commercial milk industry has tried very hard to pronounce raw, unpasteurized milk dangerous, claiming that it can carry infections. Research shows that raw milk is very safe to drink. In fact, it is better protected from infections than pasteurized milk. Milk is almost the white blood of the animal with some cells removed. It is full of alive, active immune cells, white blood cells, enzymes, hormones, probiotic microbes, and other elements which protect it from infections. When we pasteurize milk, we kill it. It becomes a dead substance which cannot protect itself from any microbe. Of course, any food can get contaminated, including milk. However, modern organic farming follows very strict hygiene practices, so there is no risk of having infections that people used to get from milk some 100 years ago. Tuberculosis, for example. Infected milk comes from an uninfected cow. All animals in the Western world are regularly tested for infections, and the veterinary standards are very high. So having raw milk from an organic pasture-fed cow today is very safe. Safer than it has ever been. In conclusion, so dear reader, what do you choose? Industrial, chemical, agriculture, or organic, natural food production? Poor quality food, full of agricultural chemicals and antibiotics, or real food? If you choose vegetarianism, please reconsider. Your choice spells disaster for our planet because it is based on industrial arable agriculture. Only this kind of agriculture will be able to produce all the plants you want to eat. If you are a person that works hard in the garden to produce your own plant matter, then that deserves respect. However, people who grow their own organic vegetables will tell you that it is not possible to produce enough organic plant matter in a private garden to feed even one vegetarian for a year. That is why vegetarians buy their food in supermarkets, even those who have organic gardens. Industrial agriculture is rapidly becoming the most powerful destructive force for our planet. It destroys the topsoil, releasing carbon into the atmosphere and causing global warming. It poisons land and water and produces disease-causing food for us. Food based on suffering animals and birds and chemically produced plants, which are forced to grow on exhausted, deficient soils. Food that destroys our beautiful planet, and food that ultimately destroys us. Why not choose a natural way of producing food? Instead of the arable wasteland that our countryside has become today, imagine land with many pastures and herds of healthy and happy animals. After a few years of rotational grazing, the animals will restore the land's fertility, so we can grow some healthy organic crops on this land. Imagine pigs raised in a forest, a perfect environment for them, where they can eat acorns and roots, grubs and caterpillars, grasses and leaves, their natural food, and assist the forest in its growth and good health. Imagine flocks of chickens raised in organic orchards where chickens dig and eat grubs and caterpillars, protecting the trees while fertilizing the ground. These orchards will produce excellent organic fruit without any chemicals. Imagine geese and ducks raised in swampy areas and on pasture near ponds and lakes, where they will help the soil to build rich humus, which holds large amounts of water. This will protect nearby villages and towns from flooding and give the birds a happy, healthy habitat to live in. Our food can be produced in harmony with nature without damaging the planet, but instead making it even more beautiful and plentiful. Unfortunately, this kind of change can never come from above because we are ruled by the commercial and political machine. This kind of change can only come from the grassroots, individuals who make a conscious choice about what they want to eat and how they want their food to be produced. The more farms diversify and convert to organic and natural, the better our food supply will become. Only organic, diversified farms, where animals and birds are given a chance to restore the fertility of the land so we can grow healthy crops on it without chemicals, can provide the real quality of food we all want. Find these farms and support them. Buy their produce exclusively. When you buy directly from the farmer, your food will be less expensive, fresh, and excellent quality. The rest will be better health and vitality. The result will be better health and vitality for you and your loved ones. There is no good health without good food. There is no good food without healthy soil. And there is no healthy soil without happy and healthy farm animals and birds.